Thanks a lot. I think we're sort of continuing from yesterday's discussion, and many of the friends were there yesterday. And before going into my presentation, I'd just like to point out that community-based governance or people-based governance is something that is absolutely central to transforming public systems. This is not something peripheral or something which is out there or something which is down there. It's often when we talk about community-based monitoring, planning, governance, these issues are considered to be sort of okay, something that can be added on. But public systems is something which is a technical kind of area. So I'll start by calling to your attention an interesting fact. Roman arches are standing 2,000 years after they were constructed. Now there was some special ingredient that must have been there. They didn't have modern technology, they didn't have computers, they didn't even have modern cement and concrete. So why are those arches still standing? Can any of you?
Physics.
Physics? Well, that is only part of it. Solid basis.
The keystone in arch, right?
You're close, but the key ingredient was accountability. You see, when these arches were constructed by the chief mason or engineer, before the scaffolding was removed, he had to stand under the arch. And so he had to be damn sure that this thing is going to be solid. And they're standing 2,000 years later. So the point is, accountability is a central ingredient of any kind of public systems, of any kind of public construction. It's not something peripheral. And so that's why we have to see how this can actually be built into our public systems. And that's why I think I'll argue, and probably also Walter and Ariel will, that people-centered governance is something which is a burning need today to transform our public systems. And we have to now develop working models, not just rhetoric. We have to have actual working models on the ground across different countries, different areas, which will start showing that, look, this is the way that public systems can be made to work, centered on people's, governance. So I'll start with a story. Actually, I told you this story, some of you who were there yesterday, about the Maligrave Primary Health Center, which was transformed through the whole community-based monitoring process in Maharashtra. And where as a result of this, the community monitoring process, people came to know about the facilities, they started utilizing the facilities, and 3 private clinics closed down. And this is the data about the transformation which took place. How can public facilities be transformed? It's a good example. So in 2010-11, before CBMP, community-based monitoring started, there were only 8 deliveries in the whole year. This year there have been 125 deliveries. Indoor admissions have quadrupled, outpatient consultations have doubled, and this is because people have come back to the public facility because they have a sense of ownership and trust. And rebuilding trust is very central. I'll come to that later. So the point is, if this happens, automatically the private clinics will have to close down because people are coming back to the public facility. But we have to understand, public health systems, like all systems, are not unqualified good or unqualified bad. They are an arena of contention and struggle. And we have to really sort of enter into that arena of struggle and see. Now, the blue cylinder is the public system. And on one side, the red, on the left side, is the social movements, civil society groups, mass movements, which are trying to pull it to the left, literally. Which are trying to say that, look, you have to be accountable, you have to work according to people's needs. And on the right side is the private sector, which is continuously infiltrating, weakening, and in many ways manipulating these public systems to say, look, why don't you have a PPP, a partnership with us, and you just give us the funds and we'll do the rest. So, and the public health bureaucracy is somewhere in between, and also the political representatives, they have contradictory motives. And we have to get into the depth of it. This is a can which has to be opened also from the inside. We have to get into what is going on inside this, in this public system, and I'll refer to that because we don't have much time. But I would like to say that central to the whole process that we are doing is the vision of democratizing the public health system. Many developing countries, we claim to be democracies, people allege that India is the largest democracy in the world. I don't accept that allegation because we don't really have a democracy in this. Yeah, but anyway. But the point is that there is a space. And democracy has not percolated into public systems. It's something like it's an icing on the top, so we have 5 elections once in 5 years, we have some representation. But if you look at public systems, do they function democratically? Either in the relationship with people or their own internal relationship with their employees and workers? No. So that democratization is central. And you have to break through the alienation and bureaucratization of public health system, which is probably true of many other public systems. And we don't just uncritically accept the public as a positive thing or reject it as something which is hopelessly bureaucratized. We have to start transforming it. And that is where our strategy has been 1 foot inside, 1 foot outside. So we say 1 foot, we will put inside the public system, we will dialogue with the officials, we will partner with them, we will work with them, but 1 foot will be outside. Because we have to keep pressurizing them, we have to keep building a momentum for change. Otherwise, if we become co-opted, that's finished. We won't be able to change things. And how did this whole process emerge in India? There's a whole history to it. PHM India had a Right to Healthcare campaign in 2003-04. Following that, we had a new government in 2005. It launched a National Rural Health Mission, etc., etc. I won't go into the details. 9 states were selected for a pilot implementation in 2007. Maharashtra, which is the western part of India, the purple, it's the second largest state of India with about 120 million people. So, so it's a state, but it's pretty big. It's probably, if it were a separate country, it would be somewhere in the top 10, 12 countries of the world. so we're talking about a reasonable scale on which this has happened, because people say, oh, what are you guys doing? It's something, on a small scale. So, so here we have 13 districts across Maharashtra and all kinds of areas. So we have worked out this methodology with a lot of diverse and locally applied approaches. It's not a single one-size-fits-all approach. They are the most remote rural and tribal areas of Maharashtra, and they are some of the most developed, areas. 815 villages are covered right now in these 35 blocks, and now this year we are now expanding to more than 1,000 villages across 18 districts. And we're trying to say that this works in different kinds of contexts. It's not something which is... So now what is the base? And this diagram sometimes frightens people a little bit, but these are the multi-stakeholder committees that have been formed and which are functioning at multiple levels. And as I mentioned yesterday, because the public system is so multi-tiered, the system for transforming it will also have to act at multiple levels. Otherwise, it will only remain at the village level, or it will only be lobbying at the state or national level, but we have to look at the block, the PHC, the district, and this is where actually policy is implemented. And that is also the levels where we have to act. And each of these committees has elected representatives. 1/3 or 30% of the members are elected representatives, the panchayat members, up to the state level. So we have to reclaim elective democracy. We cannot leave it out. 20% are public health officials. Then there are community-based organizations, mass organizations, and representatives from the communities. All of these together sit in each of these committees, and that is where the difficult dialogues take place, and that is where the change is ensured. Because unless there is a pressure and a dialogue, it doesn't happen. So what are some of the key processes? Community awareness of health rights, which is central, and where we have built on the PHM tradition of health rights campaigning, and we have told people that now we have to actually claim these rights and make them real. It's not just rhetoric. We have to go and see what is happening in the PHC, what is happening in the public hospital, and actually then can collect data, fill report cards. I have some copies of some of the report cards which are pictorial, public documents which are rated by people. Each service in the public facility is rated as either green, which is good, yellow, which is partly satisfactory, or red, which is bad. And these are put up. And then committee members visit the health facilities, look at the stock of medicines, look at the infrastructure, look at the labor room, look at the wards, and so on. And then there are these monitoring committees which meet and where these issues are raised. And finally, there are Jan Sunwais, which are public hearings. And these are the real engines of change. We have had more than 400 such public hearings in the last 4 years. And each public hearing is an event of change. Because here hundreds of people gather, the report cards are presented, the cases of denial are presented, and the health officials have to respond. Sometimes they don't come, sometimes they're reluctant to come, but they're pulled in. And whatever it is, by the media, by the political representatives, and we say, look, you have to sit here and answer people's questions and solve the problems. And we will not get up until the problems are solved. This is how change takes place. How do public systems change? It's a fascinating study actually. It's not just rhetoric. You have to solve problems. And you have to actually rebuild the commitment of those public officials to serve the public. This is how it is done. And we call this the engine of change, the public hearings. This is really, and in India we have a saying called 100 taps by a goldsmith and 1 blow by an ironsmith. So the 100 taps by the goldsmith does a lot of fine work, and that is necessary for the advocacy groups, the NGOs, and so on. But okay. So this has led to a whole range of improvements across CBM areas. Prescribing medicines from outside has stopped. Illegal charging has practically stopped. Frequency of visits of staff to villages has significantly increased. Rude and abusive behavior, which used to be a significant complaint in the first round, has practically stopped. Immunization coverage has gone up. This is a rating of report card. The same report card in round 1, only 44% of the PHC services were good. By round 4, which is about 2.5 years later, 75% services were rated good. The same report card, the same people rated it. So utilization has gone up. And utilization has gone up differentially more in CBM areas compared to other PHCs. So this is a comparison of increase in deliveries. The blue bar is across the district, Thane district, and the red pink bar is in the CBM areas, where there's been a doubling of deliveries in 2 years. So this is combined with community-based planning. I don't have the time to talk about it. These are some of the main points I would like to say. What do we actually take from this? It's a practical approach to making health rights real, democratizing the public health system. When health system reform takes place, what do we do as activists? That was a dilemma before us when National Rural Health Mission was launched. What do we do? Do we just go and sit in the committees at the national level? Or do we actually see what is happening? And that is where the worm's eye view, as a counter to the bird's eye view. So officials will tell us, we have spent so many rupees, we have deployed so much staff, we have done so much construction. Okay, fine, but what are people getting? What is finally the outcome at the level of the community? That is something that community-based monitoring presents. And we are saying communitization is an alternative to privatization, and we have to restore public agency. But one of the core issues today in public system is of public agency. What is the motivation? And what is the agency to work, and that enhancing the publicness. And what we are saying as far as democracy, democratization, how do we democratize public systems? Number 1, promote forums for direct democracy, where the public hearings and the Arogya Gram Sabhas, which are the village assemblies, are direct democracy. Second, expanding representative democracy. Representation in India is very narrow. There's a monopoly of representation. By whatever caste, religion, throwing money, somebody gets elected. And then they're the representative for 5 years. We're saying, sorry boss, you're not the only representative. There's community-based organizations, mass organizations, groups which will also be involved in representing people's opinions and reclaiming representative democracy through activating these and activating internal accountability through external accountability processes. We have expanded this to other social services. Now we begin to the nutrition and child care services. We had a state level convention on all social services, how we can make them accountable. There are a whole range of challenges. Again, the time is limited, so I'll probably have to skip some of these, but there has been a lot of resistance. But at the same time, we have also got support from unexpected quarters. So on one hand, officials have often resisted being held accountable. They don't like to stand in a public hearing and answer questions. But at the same time, lower level staff, providers, frontline providers have said what you're doing is good. For the first time, somebody is actually, trying to improve our system in a genuine way. Whole range of, but maintaining this space is a huge challenge. So like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. This space is a contested space. The state does not tolerate dissent. The state likes to shut down any kind of dissent or countervailing power. And our point is this has to be expanded. Now, so just to maintain that space is a huge challenge for which a lot of energies are required. It's like we call a game between an elephant and a mouse. And okay, so I'll skip this. This is, I think, an important framework which we have used. which is from Eric Olin Wright about participatory governance. But since we don't have time, I will skip that, and I'll also skip the strategies because again we don't have time. I'll come to the lessons learned. First of all, what do we carry from this? What have been some of the ingredients of whatever level of success we have achieved? First of all, community participation and activism is central. And people get activated when they see hope and when they see change. So when based on their awareness of rights, people see that actually things can change, they do get activated. Involving local elected representatives. This was a dilemma for us. The first 2-3 years, no elected representative was interested in this, filling these report cards and doing all this stuff. They said, oh, this is all not important. But after the first 2-3 years, when they started seeing things changing, they actually got involved. Use of community-based information, multi-stakeholder dialogue, we have found is very, very important, where all the different concerned actors sit together on a common table and really discuss the problems frankly. That is when things start getting solved. Mass accountability events, as I mentioned, is an important thing. A chain of reinforcing actions. So these issues start from the village level. If they're not solved there, they're raised at the block. If not solved there, raised at the district. If not solved there, raised at the state level. So all the officials along the line know that these guys, once they raise an issue, they're not going to let go of it. Like the little prince who, once he asked a question, he would keep asking that question. So that's what we try to do, that whether it is solved or not, but we are going to keep asking. So then all officials know that we have to address things. We cannot just do problem shifting. A coalition of rights-based civil society organizations is very diverse, mass organizations, people's movements, NGOs which have not worked in a rights-based mode, but which are today, now they have gotten involved in this kind of process. A system of entitlements, engaging with healthcare providers and resources for facilitation. And I will just again skip all of these and just, now this is something which is a outcome, last 3 slides. But I think it's a little important for this conference, and that is that how do we build a larger movement for the social sector, for rejuvenating the entire social sector. And this is something we have launched about a year back in Maharashtra, a movement for the right to live, which is a cross-sectoral coalition repoliticizing the rights to social services. Because we have found that individual social sector campaigns have been getting a somewhat compartmentalized, and therefore we have tried to build a broad-based social sector alliance. And these are the sectors that are covered: food security, education, healthcare, water, pension, employment security, public transport, and now we are adding housing. These are all public services which people require. And these are all part of people's lives. They are not things which can be actually fragmented. And interestingly, in the neoliberal framework, there is a common policy framework to actually restrict, privatize, and weaken the public element of all of these services. The state is clear, but as activists, are we clear that we have to work together? So we have tried to bring together social movements, unions of unorganized sector workers, organized sector unions, women's organizations, youth groups, and left and democratic parties on a common platform. For the first time, people who did not used to dialogue with each other, you know how it is on the left. But we have managed to come together, and these are 6 cross-cutting demands. Double public spending on social services. Financing is central. Without a budget, you cannot have a service. Universal social services without any kind of targeting. In India, we have this targetitis. This is for the below poverty line, this is only for this section. So we said, no, sorry boss, you have to universalize, otherwise these services will, and the middle class has to come on board. Stop all forms of privatization, strengthen and expand the range and quality of public services. It has to recapture people's imagination. Today, people have become so apathetic towards public services. Implement community-based monitoring in all these sectors, not only health, and ensure access to services for the excluded and marginalized sections. So, thank you. I think that what we are trying to do at multiple levels, it's a very tough process, but we can revitalize public system and present an alternative to privatization. Thank you.